and welcome everyone to our side event. It's good to see quite a lot of people anyway. We were expecting that we might be more on the panel than in the audience with all the exciting things going on at the same time, but it's really good to see that you all could make it and join us here for a side event called Indigenous Peoples' Rights, Implementation Gaps, and the Indigenous Peoples Platform as a First Step. So, why did we choose this title? We believe that there is a very close connection between the Indigenous Peoples' Rights mandate from the Paris Agreement and the establishment of the Indigenous Peoples Platform. And it's important to look at why that is and what are the local realities in relation to that. So this is why we felt that we needed to somehow have an event addressing those issues. And we, that is the Nepal Federation of Indigenous Peoples, NEFIN, and the Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact, and the International Workgroup for Indigenous Affairs, IWGIA, who are the co-organizers of this event. My name is Catherine Wessendorf, and I work for IWGIA, International Workgroup for Indigenous Affairs. And as you can see, we are quite a lot of people on the panel, so I will not take too much time, but will immediately give the word to our first presenter. And I'm really happy that she found time to be here with us today, Hindu Umaru Ibrahim. Hindu is the co-chair of the International Indigenous Peoples Forum on Climate Change, that is the body that is representing the indigenous peoples here. Hindu, it's a pleasure to give you the floor.
You have the presentation there? Thank you very much, Catherine. Good morning, everybody. It's really a real pleasure to have the first site event on Indigenous Peoples Platform, because that have been a long way negotiation in Paris when we get the decision, then a long way negotiations also in Marrakesh, where we get through this exciting process that we are there. Just to give you the ideas of what was the decision that we are discussing about the platform, as you can see, it is the 1 CP21 paragraph 135. This is into the Paris decisions. So then it say recognizing the need to strengthen its knowledge, technology, practice, and efforts of local communities and indigenous peoples related to addressing and responding to climate change, and establish a platform for the exchange of experience in sharing of the best practice on mitigation and adaptation, both in the holistic and integrated manner. So for us, this paragraph is saying two things. Establishment of the platform is one thing, then also how it can allow with indigenous peoples to come together and share the experiences and build like a participation into this platform. So for it, we have like the oversharing visions. So for this one, firstly, we have to be in concordance with the directive of the preambles of the Paris and the preambles of the decisions. In these preambles, it's saying the respect of the human rights, including the rights of indigenous peoples, how this can be taken into the consideration. And how this one can be recognized officially, because into the preambles is calling the region and international cooperation to mobilize strongly and more ambitious into the Paris Agreement, and this including also how they can mobilize indigenous peoples to all the work through the regional and international level. And for us, how this one can be in concordance with the international instruments who are protecting the indigenous peoples, like the UN DRIP, the UN Declaration on the Right of Indigenous Peoples, and the ILO Convention 169. And all these need to be with the prior informed consent, the FPIC of indigenous peoples, and the full and effective participation, and that we can have the first visions. So in this paragraph 135, it's two main purposes for us set up. So firstly, in how they can be strengthening the indigenous people's traditional knowledge. And then the second is how the establishment of the platform can be a platform of the exchange of the knowledge and the best practice. For this one, we set up a purpose. The platform should serve as a vehicle to all the human rights mandate inside the Paris agreements. And secondly, like the platform will be like a facilitated space where it can enabling indigenous peoples to take a place within the UNFCCC negotiations, and how we can participate and how we can make our issues, our problem, but also our solution that we are bringing there. And how the platform also can be facilitate the promotion of the holistic indigenous peoples knowledge sharing, and that within the indigenous peoples and indigenous peoples, because we are coming from the 7 regions around the world, and how this exchange can be from indigenous peoples to the state parties and indigenous peoples to other actors. So all of us are acting for the climate mitigation and adaptations, so we need like a way to share this knowledge into the proper way, and that could be from the local, national, regional, and also international level to mitigate climate change. So then how the platform can be facilitate the participation of the knowledge holders, because we are indigenous knowledge, but there are peoples among us who have a different knowledges, and that could be in the water protection, on the forest, and others, but how these stakeholders can be, and the practitioners can be including there, and how we can have a policies and program who can protect indigenous peoples within this platform. So for us, how the function of this platform could be. So through the 2 different knowledge technology to strengthen and the exchange sharing, we said we have to function by providing resources and capacity. This is needed both ways. Without the resources, we cannot have the knowledge sharing, we cannot have the knowledge strengthening. And this can ensure the transmission to the new generations. So because our knowledge is going from generation to generation, so with the resources and capacity building, we can be able to transfer these knowledges. And this can be a sharing of the best practice, and we can develop a guidance on how our traditional knowledge can be shared. So this can be also ensure the active policy and information to be exchanged with all the other actors. So it can be also by facilitating the indigenous people's full and effective participation. If we say that we had a session yesterday on the participation of the observer, but yes, we are participating, but how our input can be taken into the consideration by the state. This is the full and effective participation we are calling on, not just sitting in the room or having room for the IPO, but how we can input into the content of the negotiation. Then how our rights can be protected through the minimum standard that we have. So through all this, how we can understand also the science, technology, and knowledge of indigenous peoples. We have the knowledge, but our knowledge are divided. So we have divided by science, indigenous people science, indigenous people innovation, indigenous people technology. So how all those can be integrated and recognized officially. So the structure that we propose to be into the platform is firstly how we can have a permanent advisory or facilitative group that's just the names, it can be changed. So in this group, we want to have the 7 indigenous people representative from the 7 regions, and we wanted to have a state parties, 2 from developing, 2 from developed countries, so we can see how the state party can be sitting in this body with us. And the SABSTA chair, because we are under the SABSTA for now. And this body can be a permanent advisory on this platform working. And the second structure, how we can have like a expert meetings, because we cannot share those knowledges just through website or sending by SMS. It cannot work. We need to set up an expert meeting where we can come and discuss the advance. For example, if we have knowledge on water, so this knowledge of water, we can develop a report, we can develop through all the regions, and we can share it at the UNFCCC through the expert meeting. and that can be used through the negotiation to see how they can improve the policy and decision that they are taking. So then a division of the indigenous peoples platform, how we can have a permanent division, because so, as you know, at the UNFCCC there is observer liaison, there is other like adaptation mitigation. There is not any division of indigenous peoples. If we want to talk, who we are going to be addressing with. So then we wanted to have a session on dialogue at every COP, including a report with the policy and recommendation to the expert meeting. So every COP we can have a follow-up, and then we know that which step we have. If we have a thematic each year, or if we have a global assessment each year, and that during the COP it will be the big gathering where we can share the knowledge and see our knowledge as the science are taking into the same level. So then having an annual high-level event into the thematic day. So then we have the Indigenous Peoples Pavilion. But how this can be also integrated by the state parties. So through this one, we have the man of implementation of all. So the man of implementation is the funding of the platform, who can be integrated into the regular budget. So far, UNFCCC do not have any funding mechanism for observer. So we cannot attend and negotiate and share with them if we do not have a funding mechanism inside. So how they can create this one, then allow it at least some of us to attend and participate in the proper way with them. And the platform must be included transparency and unforeseeable process for these submissions. So there is the submission where the state already present, and thank you very much. I know most of you make a submission during the process, and it's going to be continuously. How all can, from the capitals, can make the submission and put the proposition, and we can have a way forward on this pathway. And then finally, there should be a second UNFCCC hosted and supported session in this platform at the COP23. So how we can review the outcome. So we are going to have the 2 days, 16 and 17. So 16 from 10 to 1 and 17 from 3 to 18. The 2 days of the negotiation, of the dialogue that we are having, how we can use this outcome also during the COP23. This is very important for us to see this outcome. So that's our proposition for the Indigenous Peoples Platform to look like. But this is just the first proposition, but it's going to be discussed and negotiated and improved, because for us it's important to build in going, to do not just come with the final product, because climate change is evaluating, and we have also to get evaluating in all our proposition during we are going. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hindu. That was a very good presentation explaining the concrete proposals that Indigenous Peoples Caucus has for the multi-stakeholder dialogue that's happening next week. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lakpanuri Sherpa. I work with SA Indigenous Peoples Pact, and I'm co-moderating this session with Catherine. So with that background of information on how Indigenous peoples, the Global Indigenous Peoples Caucus are organized for the stakeholder meeting that's happening next week, now we'd like to link the platform discussions with the experiences of different countries, and our panelists are ready to share their specific experiences from the country to have a link on the platform that we are discussing. And our next speaker is Mr. Kitisak. He's the chairperson of Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact from Thailand. Kitisak.
Thank you very much. I will be really brief. Actually, the issue that Hindu just presented is our overall the framework, what we want to see this platform will be look like. Actually, for me, I just like to look at a little bit on the gaps on the traditional knowledge issues and also the scientific knowledge issues under the UNFCCC framework. If you look at the activities and measures that are initiated under the UNFCCC. You can see that, next slide. You can see that most of the measures and activities under the UNFCCC, you see that are on the scientific knowledge-based approach. So even though the measures and activities that related to the traditional knowledge are mentioning in some issues, like in the Nairobi work program and also in the LED Plus related activities, and now also mentioned in the Paris Agreement. But this kind of issues still remain an implementation on the ground. You can see there's still a lot of gaps in actual implementations. Next. This is one of the article that mentioning the adaptation action that also consider the different knowledge, scientific knowledge and also traditional knowledge where appropriate. Next. And if you look at the issue on the traditional knowledge, is actually, as you know, it plays really key roles in terms of how to mitigate and adapt to the local conditions that the indigenous and local communities use to adjust themselves to the impact of the climate change. And if you can see at the community levels, community has many kind of knowledge. For instance, they use knowledge for forecasting the weather by observing the animal behaviors, and also look at the star, moon, sun, and also clouds, plants, and some of the indigenous people in the southern part and in Thailand who live near the sea, they also have specific knowledge about the ocean. So they can read the water and they can predict what's happening next based on that, and they can see, they can read the wind, this kind of thing. This kind of knowledge is really rich and also part of their daily lives. So they know exactly when the water is rising and when it's receding, this kind of thing. So they know exactly this kind of thing. And for the people who live in the mountain areas and who live in the forest area, they also have such kind of knowledge how to maintain and use of natural resources in a sustainable manner. So they able to classify which land is good for farming, which is good for watershed protection, and which place is good for a sacred place. This kind of thing, this kind of knowledge is really rich and really useful for a community's survival. And of course, the community also have this kind of adaptation abilities. They, of course, for instance, for the seed selections, they always select the best seeds where they think that they're able to get more products. For instance, they like to, in the dry season or in the drought season, they can find seeds that are resistant to this kind of drought, for example. And for the mitigation, many communities are still practicing this kind of shifting cultivations. Actually, they have a very good way of managing the forest. For instance, they cut down a small piece of land just for farming. But if you look at the overall picture, the large tract of forest still there. So if you calculate the number of trees that they cut and emitting the carbon dioxide, and that the remaining trees is still it's still a very good balance on the mitigation. And this kind of issue next. And this some of the pictures I'd like to show you. This the generic term I call these people, they call Chaule, Chaule are people of the sea. So they live in the sea. So there are three groups, Ulak Lavoy, Morgan, and Moglen. So this Ulak Lavoy tribe, the elder still making a rope. Next. There's also some picture about the kids, they're catching the small octopus. Yeah. So this is also specific knowledge how to catch this kind of octopus. It's not easy to find, but yeah, this kind of specific knowledge you can get it. Next. Yeah. Yeah, there also the picture that you can see. Yeah, they catch some already. Yeah, they're holding. Yeah, next. Yeah, this kind of issues. Yeah, if you look at the outer international processes, you can see that the traditional knowledge is already being recognized and also supportive on this issue. For instance, in the Convention on Biological Diversity, under the working group on Article 8J. So that's really well recognized and supportive on these issues. And another one is under the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, IIPBES. So this one also, they created the task force on indigenous and local knowledge. So they recognize the roles of traditional knowledge as equal as the scientific knowledge, and they also emphasize a lot. There also a lot of activities they also highlight on the TK of the indigenous and local knowledge. So this kind of issue is not new. So, but if you look at the UNFCCC framework, so I think that this kind of issue should be mainstreaming more. And then, of course, through the IP platform, that will be an appropriate forum where we can discuss this issue, and we can make use of the traditional knowledge to enhance the work of the UNFCCC. Thank you.
Thank you, Kitisak. Thank you very much for really listing down or explaining what are the different knowledge that communities have. And I remember because the point that Hindu made in the beginning of her presentation was to really have an exchange between different actors and the knowledge holders that are in the grassroots level. I recall an exchange in Asia where we went to the community together with the government. In the beginning, the perception of the government towards the livelihoods that Kitisak was referring to was completely different. And after the exchange, the mindset, the way they look into the traditional livelihoods of indigenous peoples completely changed. So I think there should be also a way how this platform can also help, not only to facilitate the traditional knowledge experience sharing, but also to change the mindset to look into the livelihoods of indigenous peoples, because their livelihoods are based on the knowledge that they have cultivated through generations. And another thing that we can also link when we discuss about the platform is the linkage with human rights. Because unless you have the rights to your land, unless you have the rights to your resources, you cannot exercise your traditional knowledge the community has. So I think that's also another avenue where we should be looking into how the platform can also facilitate the linkages between human rights and the traditional knowledge. Sometimes in our discussion, like whether it's climate change discussion or on forest, one of the critical things that we always forget, or knowingly or unknowingly, is about the involvement or the roles and contribution of women. So we have also tried to make a link why the indigenous women's roles and contribution and issues has to also be a part of the discussion of this platform. So our next speaker, Yumon from Chin Human Rights Organizations from Myanmar, will be sharing her experience from Myanmar. Yumon.
Thank you, Lakpa. First of all, I'd like to express my thanks to IWGIA, AIPP, and NEFIN for organizing this very important side event. And thank you to everyone who make this side event out of your lunch break. Yeah, I'm sure you will enjoy this side event. Okay, so like our moderator mentioned, the role of indigenous women and our contribution to this IP platform, I'd like to talk about why it is important. So before talking about why it is important, then I'd like to talk about what role how important is forest management and natural resource management to indigenous peoples. And then later I'll be talking about the roles that women, indigenous women contribute. Actually, for indigenous peoples, forests are our lives. And most of indigenous peoples, we strongly connect to these forests. And then we have a very good management way, sustainable management way of these forests and natural resources. We depend on these forests and forest products for our livelihood, or to make our daily life, and then also for our health, for our social economic benefits. So forests are, and these natural resources are closely connected to our ways of life, and then also they are our identity. So these forests and natural resources is really important. However, with the climate change, that we also have been struggling a lot in order to adapt to the climate change. So in the research done by AIPP and FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, actually most of the indigenous peoples in Myanmar, in the country where I come from, more than 80% of indigenous peoples rely on shifting cultivation for our livelihood. But then again, it's like more than 60% of the women contribute to this shifting cultivation. So this really reflects how big the role of indigenous women is in the livelihood, for the livelihood of indigenous peoples. Shifting cultivation is just an example of our contribution to the indigenous peoples' communities. And we have other ways of making livelihood in culture, in preserving our language, in preserving our identity. Indigenous women play a very big role. And the first one would be like transferring this knowledge to the younger generation, is what indigenous women do. And in shifting cultivation, women involve starting from the cutting trees to in every step of shifting cultivation until we get the fine products from the cultivation. So even this knowledge needs to be transferred properly to the younger generation. So here, indigenous women play a very important role of transferring all our knowledge, our culture, our language, and all these things to the younger generation. When we talk about this transferring knowledge, then it means like indigenous women are the knowledge hub for indigenous communities. So it is really important that we reflect the ideas, the suggestions, and the recommendations that come from indigenous women, because we, indigenous women, closely connect and closely manage these things from our day-to-day life. But then there is a struggle also for indigenous women, like women from mainstream societies. We also, it is the role in decision making. Indigenous women also have really big challenge in participating as decision makers in our own communities, in different communities. So this is also a really big challenge, and it is very important that if we don't reflect the voices of indigenous women, then there is, we won't be able to ensure that we get the most, the best out of what we can, because these indigenous women are the knowledge hub, and they can contribute very well, and they can reflect. They have all the ideas of what the communities really need and indigenous communities really need. So I'd like to conclude my presentation by saying that we need to reflect and we need to create a very clear role of contribution from indigenous women along the platform. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yuman, for stressing the importance of indigenous women to be a part of the platform discussions, and also highlighting the key role that the indigenous women play in transmitting the knowledge, because that's what the focus of the platform is. And because like the things are changing, situations are changing, migration is happening, so you can see a lot of changes also happening in different countries. So there is also a challenge for indigenous peoples in the community to actually keep maintaining the knowledge that they have. Climate change is affecting the knowledge of like the weather prediction that our brothers was highlighting in the beginning. So in some communities, like in Thailand, what they are doing is, because traditional knowledge is something that you learn from the way of life that you are, from the area that you belong to. You cannot study this in the school or university. So in the attempt to also to address the challenges that communities are facing, some of the initiations are being also carried out at the local level. So in one of the current villages in Thailand, the group of indigenous women, what they have done is like to have it's not really like a curriculum like in the school or something, but then they bring the children from different households, put them together, and then try to explain the history of the village, the people they belong to, and what are the knowledge and the system they have. So this is how they are trying to also sustain the system and the knowledge that they have been transferring from generations. And that's also one way of addressing the challenge that they face in this changing situation. So with that, now I would like to invite another presenter, our sister from Kenya, Eunice.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for attending our side event. I'll be speaking about the traditional knowledge of Maasai women in adaptation to climate change, in the cases from the East Africa. Next. Women are the custodian of traditional knowledge in climate change, and they play a critical role in management and utilization of natural resources. As said by many speakers already, that women, they play a critical role in our indigenous communities. Now that, especially in the management of their homes, passing the knowledge from one generation to another, women play a critical role, even in the natural resources, because in our forest, in our keeping of our livestock, women play key roles. The indigenous women are the most affected by adverse effect of climate change. In everything that affect the women are the most affected. All indigenous are affected, but indigenous women are more, especially on the issues of climate change. And inaction and policies formulated to address mitigation and adaptation strategies, women are the first affected. Because, you know, in our African region, or the East Africa particularly, that if the drought is prolonged, men can go after their livestock, they take care of their livestock, and women remain behind to take care of their young children and their weaker animals. So mostly the women are more affected. Next. The traditional knowledge and local livelihood. The Maasai indigenous people of Kenya and Tanzania are pastoralists who are nomadic, moving from one place to another in search of water and pastures. They entirely depend on livestock as the only source of income. Yes, as we know that pastoralists are nomadic, they move from one corner to another, and even in the case of Kenya and Tanzania, they can exchange. When the drought is too much in Kenya, like the past many months ago, the pastoralists move from one corner to another in search of their pasture, because our livelihood, our cattle, our goats, our sheep are the only source of income that we have. So we take care of them by moving from one corner to another. The Maasai community play a key role in social and customary system. They provide the following: the milk from our cattle and our sheep and our goats, the meat, the blood, the cooking oil, the skin, and they use as their mattresses. It's the role of the women that to ensure that the skin from the animals are prepared as a mattress for the family. So it's women. Traditionally, and up to now, women prepare these skins for their families to use it as a mattress in day-to-day life. Next. The trade economy, cash economy, agriculture, crops, and meat industry. All these are we get from our livelihood, our cattle, and our goats and sheep. We get all this because we sell them and we get the cash, and also the meat industry because of the skin and all other things. Next. The adaptation. Maasai women have knowledge in management of the land and forest products, e.g. collecting firewood, type of tree species for medicine and for house building, identifying grazing areas for calves. In this we mean, using our traditional knowledge, it's women who know the kind of species from our trees that it treat. If it is cold for our children, it's women to identify from the forest and know the kind of tree that treat a certain disease or a certain outbreak of any disease in the family. Women have coping mechanism during the drought season, e.g. using the cow dogs and as an alternative energy for cooking where there is no firewood. You know, in our forest, when there is drought, all the trees dry up. And if they dry up, there is no firewood for cooking in their family. So they opt for using the cow dungs. They collect it, they dry up, and that is the traditional knowledge they use in preserving and for the children not to go hungry. They cook using all those things. Women, they have a role to protect the traditional land tenure. It's a women because we live in the customary land. Because we believe the customary land, if we go for privatization of land, the land tenure will be challenged. But if you say we stay in the communal land, it's women who protect the land because they were given a chance to participate in this society. Women are the caretakers of the weaker livestock during the drought season. When this, as I said, livestock is the source of income, when the stronger one move from one corner to another, the weaker one is the women. It's the role of women. They walk for distance to search for water. The water they bring home for domestic, they will also share with the weaker animals, which is still, it's women who are keeping that as a source of income, and they're assisting their husband or their fathers. They are also ensure the protection of water sources. You know, water is scarce in the pastoralist setup, especially during the effect of climate change. So women really play a critical role, protect the sources of water, that the children will get it either from school, either those who go to school, the animals. It is their role. They play critically because if there is no water, there is no life. So it's women who protect it. As far as women have played all those critical roles, we still have challenges. And these are the challenges faced by indigenous people, especially the women. The critical role of women are not recognized. As said by my sister and the rest of the panelists, this role of women recognition is still a challenge. As far as they play major things in our society, in our community, the recognition is still a challenge in all our lives. In despite of all efforts made by women in managing and protecting the resources, women are still marginalized. They are marginalized because if an opportunity comes, either in decision making, they are not given the upper hand. If it is, for example, any community meeting or any other things that it's meant to share, it's meant to say, they are the men who have the say, so women are still marginalized. They are not given the potential or the decision-making role to play, for example, participating or even making decisions and even chairing of these meetings. They always sideline women, despite the critical role they play in our society. And finally, the mitigation and adaptation strategy formulated at the national and at the international and national level undermine indigenous women knowledge in climate change. Because as far as we talk here and we share our experiences, also at our subnational level and national level, we still need women to participate, to come out and talk about their issues, because they are the one who know the problem that they are undergoing through or they are passing. Thank you very much, and later maybe my colleague can add.
Thank you, Eunice, for expounding on the diverse role that the indigenous women has, and also the specific concerns that they have facing in the context of climate change adaptation and mitigations. Since we have 3 more speakers, so I would like to already go to, invite Rodion. He is with the Center for Support of Indigenous Peoples of the North from Russia. Rodion.
Yes, thank you very much, Lakpa. Good afternoon, my name is Rodion, and I'm with Russian indigenous peoples, and I also working very hard with Hindu as a co-chair of the indigenous peoples forum on climate change. And it's a great pleasure to be today because it's a new era after Paris Agreement. It's a new stage how we can meet all decisions made in Paris. And using this opportunity, I would like to thank all of you for being with us, I believe, in Paris, because it was a big struggle. We know that basically all decisions are developed and made and done by capitals, but in reality, the ground people are facing with the first impact like climate change. So that was a strong commitment of all stakeholders and civil societies working together in Paris to fight for human rights and land rights. So we as indigenous peoples, we are still at the front line facing with climate change impacts. And so that is very critical for us to have our own space within new stage after Paris, and to create indigenous peoples platform. So and Hind already has highlighted the key issue and the indigenous peoples approach and vision, how it could be structured and organized. It's just the starting process, and we will continue our own discussion and negotiation during this week and also next week. First, I would like to point out some key issue from my prospect with regards to IP platforms. It's of course it's a status and how the IP platform will be functional. Even we are looking at this new space as a cross-cutting place for promoting traditional knowledge, but I still do believe that it will meet the rights-based approach within our new platform, because we have to fight for our rights, including land rights and self-determination rights, free prior and consent. The next point, of course, it's a regular budget, because in order to be functional, we need strong support from parties and from Secretariat to have a fully operational platform between COPs, but also within the UNFCCC Secretariat. And also the next quite big issue is how the national and local communities will contribute to the whole process, including IP platform, and how their voices and the knowledge and practices will be held and integrated into the whole global process. So there are still gaps, again, between local, national, and global. And our task also to minimize this gap and to bring our one voice, but also bring different communities' expectation and practices to the podium. And I also would like to share with you some our Russian knowledge and experience, how we are working and cooperating at the national level with other stakeholders, of course, with government. And ironically, we are still between two rocks. The first one, it's industrial development based on natural resources exploitation, and also between conservation policy, which also provides some both negative and positive impact. And I believe that we as indigenous peoples, we like a human indicator for the future development and global level. How we can survive, how we can develop our own life, and how we control our own development. That is still a lot of questions without clear answers, but it's again a long-term process, and the Paris Agreement have already created a new instrument and international mechanism how we can work together under different political regime and under one international standards. Russia, it's a quite a big country. You know, it's the biggest country in the world, and we are living in very remote areas, particularly across Russian Arctic, Siberia, and the Far East. Here you will see different colors, meaning different indigenous nations. We covered 2/3 of the total Russian Federation, even we are a minority at our land. And the role of indigenous peoples and their knowledge are increased, I should say, because of, I already mentioned two-dimension industrial development and conservation policy, and both stakeholders meet with indigenous peoples on their way. Of course, we are still dealing with our fighting for human rights in terms of self-determination and collective rights, and but as many indigenous peoples worldwide, I'm trying to short up my presentation. And even climate change and adaptation issue and measures, it's a cross-cutting issue, because we need more. We should have a broader approach, including risk assessment, contaminants, food security, health issue, and many others. Also, like cultural prospect, because it's a big challenge to survive surrounded by domination society in terms of languages, in terms of youth commitment, and many others. So it's that's why we should be well self-organized, and to create alliances and cooperate with all civil society. And Russia has approved Paris Agreement, but not yet ratified. Unfortunately, Russia has approved a climate doctrine for 2025. Russia has approved and developed a national strategy for biodiversity and an action plan. The only gaps we are still missing, it's a lot of resources provided for implementation phase. So, and this year is announced by Russian government as a year of environment, and Russian government would like to increase the number of protected areas. It's also another conflicting point. And now we are trying to promote co-management approach in order to to keep our control over our lands and natural resources. It's also a very difficult task. With regards to traditional knowledge, I don't see a conflict between Western science and traditional knowledge. The only things we need to cooperate more with scientific society, because it's not too easy being reindeer herders or hunters or fishing without any knowledge on biodiversity, flora and fauna, on weather, and many other, let's say, science. You never survive in mountains, in forests, in tundra. So the only things, the traditional knowledge are not classified very well. So like Western science, but it doesn't mean that it's not a science. So and we should talk more and discuss how these both science should be integrated and work together. That's why we are here to promote our own traditional knowledge to be integrated into the whole process of UNFCCC. So and traditional knowledge is not like a static issue. It's a living organism. If we are still keeping our land, nature, lifestyle, it means we are still keeping and develop our traditional knowledge. If there is land grabbing, it's a marginalization. It means the traditional knowledge are also getting down. So it's completely direct link. So it's we have to also fight for our rights in any levels. It's a typical picture of Russia in terms of development, because fortunately, but for us it's unfortunately, our land is rich on natural resources. But all money are flowing to capitals, all decisions made by capitals, and there is very poor for the local development. It's just an example, a hotspot with different flags. It's ongoing conflicts between extractive industry and communities of indigenous peoples. It seems that Russia looks so big, but if you look at different regions, it's already developed by many industrial projects. And unfortunately, Russia economy is completely based on the natural resources exploitation. So I think it's this is my final slide. We can adapt to everything, but we cannot adapt without our lands and nature. That is our, I think, key message to everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rodion, for ending with a very strong message that our lands are our life, our resources are our lives. Yeah, actually, when we were in Paris, like really advocating for indigenous people's rights, doing protests, organizing a dialogue with government, or having a meeting with other civil society, actually, Rodion and Hindu played a very instrumental role in leading the IP caucus to really make our presence there in that conference. And we still need your support and also your active engagement to operationalize the things that we have achieved. So with that, now I'd like to invite Tunga from Nepal Federation of Indigenous Nationalities. Tungaji.
Thank you, Lakpa. My name is Tunga Rai. I come from Nepal, and I belong to Rai indigenous community of Nepal, native of Himalayan and the hill region of the eastern part of the country. So I would like to thank you for coming to our side event, and also take you from Russian Siberia to the cold Himalayan village of Nepal. So I would limit my presentation on the case study that is part of my university thesis. So the topic of my short sharing would be indigenous knowledge and culture of Loba indigenous peoples of Lomantang, which is a key to thriving in an arid Himalayan village. So this is the picture of Nepal in the upper side, in the right side, between China and India. And my study site or my case study comes from the small dot in the north part of Nepal. And Loba indigenous peoples are one of the 59 indigenous groups recognized by the government of Nepal. And those indigenous groups are native to the Himalayan village of Upper Mustang in Nepal. The village where they belong to is 3,800 meters above sea level, so you can imagine how high and how cold and how difficult is the climatic condition in the village. And this village is totally governed by the indigenous institution, meaning that traditional kingdom or traditional king and village chief. So this is also known as the last forbidden kingdom of Nepal. So if you Google it, you can find it, meaning that it's very remote, isolated, and excluded from the mainstream. And this is the village behind the Himalayan range of Nepal. So it's a rain shadow area. It's arid and desert. So the only snowmelt rivers are the main source of water in this village. Now, in this context, I would be trying to respond two questions. So, how the Loba indigenous lifeways and livelihood is possible in such an environment, in such a context, and how these Loba indigenous people manage and protect their water resource if water is so vital to their livelihood and their life. So, in brief, what I found and what our people from this community told us was life in this cold desert is impossible without traditional irrigation system, indigenous knowledge, skill, and indigenous institution or village chiefdom system in their village. And indigenous knowledge and institution are backbone of their living in such a climatic condition for a generation, though the climate is getting harsh and harsh every year. See, this is the agriculture fields in the village. Now, I would show you the other scenery of the village that is turned green. You can see the buckwheat, the flower kind of thing, and then the barley and little traditionally managed irrigation system down in the corner, and the people on the other side. So these are all possible only through their own traditional knowledge, traditional institution, and their culture that coexist in harmony with the nature, that inspire them to regard water as a deity of the land. And, this is the core of the livelihood in the village. And this knowledge about water is embedded in local environment and culture that maintains the balanced relationship of Loba indigenous peoples with the environment. Now, if we link with the climate change discourse and climate change agreement and policies, whatever we call it, we are having in different places, different cities, in the high-level plenaries and in the high-level segments, then I would like to take you back to the context and answer questions from ourselves. How vulnerable are those indigenous peoples of those villages to the impact of climate change, and how those vulnerabilities are addressed by the Paris Agreement, for example, and how far the climate change agreement and policies help those indigenous people's livelihood and life ways to sustain in the way they would like to live forever. And finally, given the fact that the Loba indigenous peoples hold such a unique knowledge on how to manage their water resources, how to adapt in such a harsh environmental condition and climatic condition, then how these people can synergize their knowledge with the so-called modern knowledge, and what is the platform where they can contribute to combat climate change, and how they can be the actor to act together with party stakeholders and other non-party stakeholders. So these are the questions that may find the answer within my case study. With the consideration of the time limitation, I would not go in detail. I would stop here. If you have any suggestion and question, I'd be happy to talk bilaterally after our side event, or maybe briefly during the side event. Thank you.
Thank you, Tungaji. That was a very good example of explaining like how vital the traditional knowledge of indigenous peoples is, not just to maintain their livelihoods, but also to maintain their identity as peoples in places that they belong to. Before we open the floor for questions and answers, there is a new publications from our partner, International Work Group for Indigenous Affairs. So I'd like to request Catherine.
Thank you, Lakpa. Yeah, thank you all of you for your interesting presentations. I think that we have all learned that we have a lot of learning to do. I think there is a lot of need of capacity building of the international community and what there is out there, the richness of knowledge and experiences, and I think it's really very impressive to always to hear that. Also, there are actually good examples for indigenous people's participation in international processes. Kitisak mentioned the CBD and the IPBES, but there is also an ongoing process in the UN General Assembly, some of you might know that, on indigenous people's participation in the UN, which is really discussing on how can indigenous peoples better participate in UN bodies? Because indigenous peoples do not represent organizations or issues as NGOs do. They're actually representing peoples. So how can you facilitate a better participation of peoples, of indigenous peoples in the UN? And there will be a resolution from the UN General Assembly in September this year, which might be really interesting to look at when we also talk about an indigenous peoples platform in the UNFCCC. And having said that, I would like to say that there's an article about that and about many other things in our book, The Indigenous World. It's a book we publish every year, and it's a compilation of articles. I think it's 60 articles from countries around the world and the situation and development of indigenous peoples and their rights in those countries, as well as a compilation on international processes and indigenous peoples. I don't have many copies with me. It's quite heavy. But you can download it from our website, and you're welcome to pick up a card here to get the website information. But I would like to use the rest of the time for questions and comments.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you. Now, we'd like to open the floor for questions or clarifications, or if you want to share your experiences from your countries relating to the topic that we discussed. So please, we can take 3 questions first, and then, we will go to the second round. Please introduce yourself and also identify who you want to address the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Jorge Cabrera from the Guatemala delegation. Just to reiterate and confirm our full support as a delegation, as in the past in Marrakesh and Paris, to support strongly the initiative of the platform of consultation that you already present in the submission.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the support for the Indigenous Peoples Caucus, and we look forward to working together. Thank you.
No, you can just speak and it's working. Yeah,
No.
Yeah. No?
No.
Hello?
You can use mic.
Yeah. It is.
Hello, my name is Mar Maure. I come from Mexico, from the Mayan region. I was interested in the mention. I would like to, if you could expand more on the co-management of the lands, and is this an alternative? Is there any successful cases? And is this an alternative to today's conflicts over land and protected areas, and even REDD+ and other initiatives? Is this a priority for the platform as well?
One more? Okay, yeah.
Hi, my name is Stefan Dehn from Germany, and my question would be maybe to everyone, what do you see as the main barriers between Western science and traditional knowledge?
Thank you very much. Yeah, I would like to request our panelists to respond. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, because I have to leave, though I have just to make one comment. Thank you so much, Guatemala. Just to share with you the best example that we have during our negotiation in Marrakesh, like we do not supposed to negotiate or speak as observer, then Guatemala give us the floor. Like we spoke in the flag as Guatemala and raise our issues, and that's really very appreciated. And if other states are there, then for the next time, this is the way of collaboration to improve the platform. So we really wanted to appreciate this one and to appreciate our collaborations. Just quickly, there is no barrier in between the traditional knowledge or science knowledge. The barrier is not coming from us. The barrier is coming from the scientists, because scientists, they want 1 + 1 is 2. So for us, our knowledge are oral. Then our knowledge is linked, very complex to understand. So I can give you just the example of weathercasting. In my peoples, when we want to see it's going to rain, we observe the trees. We observe the flower of the trees. So just like the daily meteorological, when we go out, we are not reading or seeing this, the sun. So we just observe the insect. When the insect go out with the eggs or without the eggs, we know that it's going to rain today or it's not going to rain today. And from the wind who is coming, if the wind is coming from the south or from the north, if the wind is heavy or if the wind is hot or cold, and that can determine just so during the day it's going to rain or not. So those knowledges are not easily understood by the scientists, and they won't have like the evidence, how you do that and how you explain that. We cannot explain that. We live with it. So those are not the barrier, but those are the complexity of our knowledges, and scientists need to understand. They have just to accept it and integrate these knowledges. So those what I can tell you in this response. And thank you very much. I'm sorry I have to leave. Then my colleague will be there.
With regards to co-management issue, I have to say it's not 100% of solution, but it's a part of our solution and alternative, how we can manage and keep our land and keep our control over the land and natural resources. Just a quick example. 3 years ago, under the presidential decree of Mr. Putin, he signed a decree to create national park at our traditional territory to protect Amur tiger as the biggest wild cat. You know how he likes wild tigers. So even tiger for us is a sacred site. We never hunt for him, and we are guaranteed to keep tiger because we are living in a peaceful way for hundreds of years. So, but the negotiation took 3 years before the national park had been created half a year ago. So 3 years of tough negotiation, and we demand to create a permanent council under the national park management of indigenous peoples to keep our traditional lifestyle. And finally, they accept 90% of our demand, And the territory of national park now conclude 69% of indigenous territory for traditional nature use. It's good for us. So we can keep our traditional activity like hunting, fishing, and gathering of non-timber products. But also people can be employed in terms of, and it's a good source for local income and development. But that is very exclusive case. It took 3 years. But now, because again, this year is a year of environment in Russia, and government would like to increase the number of national parks, so we should be prepared well and to negotiate and to bring positive case. And last point, in Russia we have special law on traditional lands since 1999, signed by Mr. President, but it's never implemented. So that's why we accept as co-management approach as a part of solution to keep our land. Thank you.
Can others would like to respond? Oh. Yeah, Kitisa?
Okay, maybe I just respond to the last question about the main barriers, about the Western science knowledge and also the traditional knowledge. Actually, I think that in the old day, because this kind of thing is not just happening, but it's gradually changed over the time and years. For instance, in my country, in the old day, traditional knowledge still exists and practice. Every community is still practicing those kind of knowledge. But then, when the creation of the new nation states, and also many elites, they also learning new concept from the Western countries, and those elites are coming back, and many things change. This is totally system change. Everything, education system, resource management system, those kind of things change. So the traditional knowledge are being sidelined. So it gradually, mainly it's not recognition by the state. So they mainly focus on the Western knowledge in managing those kind of things. That's the problem. I think that's the main barrier, because the role of traditional knowledge, even though it exists for a long time, but then it's not formally recognized and supported from the government. Then the traditional knowledge role is so gradually eroding. That's kind of the main barriers I can see.
Thank you, Kiti-san. So we'd like to open for the second round. Maybe it's also good, like you can share your experience about the knowledge about or the community that you come from. So it also becomes an exchange in this event. Yes.
Yeah, hi there. My name is Janis from Greenpeace, and I just wanted to share one point from our experiences working with the indigenous people of the Munduruku in Brazil last year, where we saw great opportunities to use traditional existing knowledge, and the Munduruku did very great participatory mapping exercises of this knowledge to actually counter EIA, so environmental impact assessments from large industrial or infrastructure projects. So I think using this knowledge to actually, together with scientists, counter proposals that endanger indigenous territories or not demarcated lands can really be of benefit for protecting indigenous people's lands.
Thank you very much for that contribution.
Anyone else?
Gideon?
Thank you very much for the presenters, and I would like to share a little bit experience on the Maasai indigenous people, on how they observe the clouds to determine whether there is a heavy rainfall or there's enough rainfall in the area in the certain period of time. Actually, the Maasai indigenous people look at the clouds and they can determine, even the color of the clouds can determine whether there is enough rainfall or there's no rainfall at that period of time. And actually they can look both direction, whether if the clouds come from the north direction, then they know that this year there's no enough rainfall. Or when it comes to south to west or west to east, then they can determine, and it's where they can make a decision where to take their livestock at that period of time. But also, I just want to comment on the women critical role in issue related to traditional knowledge. That also the Maasai, during the drought season, where there is no rainfall at all, they take women to the dams, and especially pregnant women to the dams, and they make rituals and pray God, and immediately after a couple of time, then the rain fall down. So those are a type of the knowledge that indigenous Maasai women use to ensure that they get enough rainfall. Thank you.
Okay, Gideon. After.
Thank you. My name is Pamela Rocha. I'm from the Ecuadorian delegation. And my comment is not about the experiences and communities, but more in line with Guatemala's comment. And I just wanted also to show our support as Ecuador, and also under the G77 chairmanship, to indigenous peoples and local communities. And we also stated on our substance statement that we welcome the multi-stakeholder dialogue that is going to take place, and especially that we want to see it really operationalized. And we don't want it to be something temporary, we want it to be something permanent so that we can have your important input on these issues. So we just wanted to show, as well as Guatemala, our support to you, and we keep going also in the negotiations along with you. So thank you.
Yeah, my name is Kimaren Oleriamit. I come from Kenya. And I want to congratulate the panelists for really very great presentation and insights. I think what is evidence is that indigenous knowledge undoubtedly is informing actions on the ground positively. It's also evident from a number of decisions now within the UNFCCC that this is increasingly being recognized in text, at least. Now, the question is, and now there is a decision to have this platform to share. So for me, I think the challenge is, how do we pull together? How do we package these knowledges and experiences? How do we communicate this to state parties? How do we enable more generation of this knowledge and documentation of this knowledge from the ground, in order that those who think that it's not as rigorous as science, they can perhaps see what has always helped us for years on end. So really, how do we make it the instrument and the substance to inform the platform going forward? Thank you.
Thank you, Stanley. Now the final inputs from Ladwe.
Thank you very much. But thank you for your giving a chance to sharing the experience. I'm Ladwe from Myanmar. I would like to share about one of the indigenous knowledge about how they conserve the forests around the village area and outside of the village area. In Myanmar, when I was doing the research and survey, and in this Magui district, the indigenous people organization, community is a Shuchin area. So they are living in the forest, and that place is really windy, and they're fully aware that they never cut down and conserve that forest area, maybe a couple of meters around their village. So the forest cover from the wind and the forest fire. There's in summer region, summer season, there's a forest fire, so they conserve that area. If the forest coming in, they just plan the forest area around their village. The nature of the fire is if places already burned, they never came in, so they are very aware of that, how to conserve and why they conserve that area. And another thing is the water resources. Without water, they can survive. So the conserving forest is the sustainable management or sustainability of the water resources. So they're fully aware of the forest, how to conserve it. That's why. Thank you.
Thank you, Lado, for sharing the experiences from Myanmar. And I would like to acknowledge also the support from Ecuador. The Ecuador and Guatemala has been the champions of really supporting the indigenous peoples. And we look forward to have more states doing similar things, supporting the proposals of indigenous peoples, but not only the states, but also the civil society who are actively participating in all the climate change negotiations. So we also look forward to your support and cooperation to really put forward, to move ahead the proposals of Indigenous Peoples Caucus. So now I would like to give the panelists to say a final remarks before we close the side event. Final.
Yes. You've been talking about participation of indigenous people on many levels of the climate issue. I'm particularly interested if there is any such thing as a fund for enabling people to come here to such panels and such boards like this, or participating. And if there is such a fund, what are the criteria of allocating the money to specific groups?
Thank you for that question. Actually, we're also really struggling to have that, but maybe some of our panelists would like to answer first, and then maybe I will wrap up. Yes?
Yes, that is a very relevant question, of course, and it's still under discussion. But several years we have discussed with Norway to create a global fund for indigenous peoples, particularly for climate change. But the idea is still, and we have to discuss more. But for time being, there is no any co-funding for IPE participation, and there is no special fund. Even many individual organizations based in regions, they're still seeking fund for the representation, but at the global level, no. And that's why it's a critical issue for creation a new platform under UNFCCC to discuss also financial matter.
Yes, once again, thank you very much, everyone. As one of the co-organizers of this site event, I would also like to thank you once again. And finally, I would like to reiterate our voice that we can contribute to combat climate change together with the parties only if our knowledge and life is valued. So, having said that, I really request parties to take account of situation and our request, not only in the platforms, but also along the way APA moves forward, along the way you discuss about the modalities, guidelines, and framework of how the Paris Agreement will be implemented. So, having said that, I thank you very much.
Yes. Kitisa, do you want to say final remarks?
Well, for me, I just really short. I think that for us indigenous people, we have knowledge, and we are ready to work with everyone, and we are willing to contribute to make the issues of climate change mitigation and adaptations to meet the goals and targets that the UNFCCC has set out. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for participating and for coming for our side event. I just want to say that as we depart here, let's all know that the indigenous women also need recognition and given an opportunity to express their issues and share, because by doing that, they will be passing knowledge from one generation to another. Thank you, everyone.
Once again, thank you very much for your participation at this side event. And what I'd like to say is that Indigenous women, we are not just talking and asking for recognition, but that we are very much ready to contribute what we can. And preparations, different kinds of preparations have been taking place at ground level, starting from ground level to national level, and then also to Indigenous women at the global level. So please do be confident with us. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Yumo. Now, it's very clear that Indigenous peoples are ready to contribute to this platform that has been established, and we are also ready to operationalize it. But what we also want is also our full and effective participation in the process that this platform is undergoing. So we need to ensure that the Indigenous peoples are consulted in the process to make sure that their voices are there when you design this whole set of agenda and also the events that's relating to this platform. So I think that's very important to make sure that Indigenous voices are also included, because that's the platform for Indigenous peoples. It's their platform, and they are the one supposed to be designing everything. So I think the proposal of the Indigenous Peoples Caucus is very important in this multi-stakeholder dialogue, and we look forward to your support and your cooperation to make sure that Indigenous people's voices, experiences, and all the contribution and the experiences that we discuss in this side event is also is a way to facilitate their contribution in that platform. So having said that, I would like to acknowledge all our speakers. Can we give a big round of applause for all the panelists? Thank you very much. And before we end, I would like to announce that there is another side event of Indigenous peoples, which is happening in this room from 3 to 4:30, and it's organized by Tepteba and Rights and Resource Initiative. It's again on rights. So we'd like to invite all of you for that side event as well. Thank you for coming and showing your support. Thank you very much.
We are very punctual.
You can ask. We're also trying to. Yeah.